Welcome to Skipper 360. I'm Michael from Blue 2 the Sailing Academy. Today we're going to look at a method of how we can stabilize a ship in the box. We always use this technique in our sailing school when we start a skipper training. And this technique guarantees that we get calm in the crew and the ship. Align the ship with both stern lines so that the ship is perfectly positioned before the first casting off maneuver and we can get started. We'll first look at the situation without wind, so that you can internalize it a bit. Then we'll look at the whole thing with crosswinds of around 16 knots. We'll then see how this technique with the two stern lines is advantageous because there's much less stress on board. And last but not least, we'll watch a live video. I'll start our simulator in a second. In our simulator, we can now see our boat. We have a Bavaria with a left-orientated propeller and we can see that we've already deployed both stern lines. Now let's think about it. We have a bit of space in the box. We want to move the boat a little to the left or to the right. You'll see that this can be done very easily using rope work with throttle and rudder. The advantage is that you can position the boat in such a way that you can perfectly avoid risks such as moorings, when you go out and can cast off without stress. Let's see how it all works. In the simulator, the throttle is marked with the red arrow and we can see that we have now deployed both stern lines. You can see that the both stern lines are bright yellow. Now let's steer to port. We want to move our boat parallel to port. To do this, we ease the starboard stern line. We don't slip it. And that's crucial, because we'll need these lines later, namely as a backup or to stop the turn. We can see that the boat is already heading to port. And if we want to stop the turn, we don't go back with the gas, we just pull the starboard line tight and set off. You can see that the boat has frozen. It remains fixed at its place. I could now use the rudder to steer a little to starboard or port so that the bow is aligned at the front. It is often the case that you want to keep the bow a little bit to the wind. Now we will do the same in the other direction. We want to lay the boat here. So our working line is now the starboard line and we are easing the port stern line. This means that when the port line is eased, we see that the boat is now shifting parallel to starboard. As soon as the bow comes a little over the middle, the rudder is straightened. Or you can even countersteer a little. That also brings the stern into the middle. We really have a pretty good parallel shift. That is the basic requirement for this basic technique that we use in this stabilization maneuver. Now let's look at the whole thing with crosswinds and you will see that it is not much different as before. So the situation is the same. We will now thrust into the stern lines and then we will set a wind of around 16 knots. That is quite a lot, 16 knots of crosswind, and we can see that the bow is already heading to leeward. We will now give more gas. You can see the flow to the rudder blade here with the green arrow. The stern wants to go to starboard here. The stern line to leeward is important. This is our backup line. It is released and not taken away. I also learned incorrectly that we loosen the leeward line and then pull the boat steady with the windward line, throttle and rudder. But we do it with two lines. We don't do anything at all at the gas. That's the crucial difference. And with the leeward line we stop the rotation. The gas stays as it is. That's the advantage. The boat has frozen again. With a 16-knot crosswind, that's a huge advantage. And if we now move the rudder a little to port or starboard, we can also hold the bow a little ahead against the wind. So the best thing now is of course to position the bow little against the wind. Now we turn the wind down to 0. And you can see that I don't need to do anything with the throttle. The ship stays fixed with the same settings even with 0 wind. That is the decisive advantage. If a gust of 20 or 16 knots comes along, the ship will stay in its position. That means we have much less stress in a box before the first maneuver starts and we can cast off in a controlled manner. And now we will look at a video where we gave up the leeward line. You will notice that that was a mistake. Not necessarily a mistake, but it would have been better if the leeward line had been there. Here we have the leeward line. It's being pulled in here. And we have Bora coming from this direction. In Croatia, that is a strong wind, around 15 to 20 knots with heavy gusts. We can see that we are now only working with the windward line and gas. And what do we notice? The boat is heading to windward. The skipper has given too much gas here and the boat is now shooting windward and hitting the other boat. And here there is a risk that the mooring line, you can see it very faintly here, could get caught in the propeller. We held the mooring line out as a precaution. I'll stop the film again now. That wouldn't have happened if the leeward line had been out as a backup. That means if we had given too much gas with the leeward line, nothing would have happened. The boat would have been fixed. The line would have been a backup, it would have been held the boat in place. So, in conclusion, if you work with two stern lines, it is much less stressful when casting off. Now we finish the video. Now we have simply taken a bit of the gas, the boat is heading to leeward and you can see very clearly in this video how quickly the Bora is affecting the boat from the side, and how much drift to leeward the boat is already having. When we go out a few meters, you can see that in front, we just passed the mooring. With a short burst on the gas, the stern turned away and we are passing the mooring line. So you saw that if you use two stern lines, you have decisive advantages here, even if you have a twin rudder. We will look at twin rudders in other videos, but with a twin rudder I basically only have the effect of the two stern lines, and that works also for boats with twin rudders.